Maki and Toji can see curses. No, I'm not talking about sensing them with their weird extrasensory abilities. I mean they can see them with their eyes. I briefly mentioned this in my last video debunking JJK misconceptions, but I massively underestimated how much motion this one tiny bit of JJK misinfo had, because I received like a bazillion comments claiming that Maki and Toji technically sense curses instead of actually seeing them, which is my fault because I really didn't explain it in enough detail at all. But in today's video, I'm gonna finally be putting this misconception and many others to rest with irrefutable facts and logic. So the idea behind this one is that after competing in a sumo match with this very interesting looking guy, Maki gained extrasensory perception, or a kind of precognition, where she can sense something undetectable or unpredictable by using her crazy enhanced senses to perceive literally everything else. If you can see everything, then you can also see what you can't see. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to explain that one, I'm not gonna lie, but hey, it doesn't matter because that's not how Maki sees curses. This is just how she keeps up with Naoya and how she does things like dodging invisible attacks such as dismantle. Maki and Toji can see curses and curse spirits with their eyes, and there are 3 things in the story which undeniably prove this. First of all, Yuki Tsukumo outright states that Toji Zenin was capable of sensing curses with his 5 senses. 5 senses: touch, taste, sound, smell, and fucking sight. Unless the Zenin bloodline counts intense misogyny as a human sense instead of sight, then I think it's pretty safe to say he could see them. Furthermore, in chapter 197, Maki tells us that without glasses, she was unable to see curses, but ever since Mai gave her this body, she could see them. She's literally saying she could see them since awakening after Mai's death, which is before she even knew about the seeing what you can't see extrasensory precog bullshit. Finally, and most importantly though, if Maki couldn't see curses and curse spirits before learning the precog thing from Daido and Mio, how the hell could she see and recognize curse spirit Naoya without glasses? The fact she could see him and recognize his face literally means that she could see him with her eyes. At this point in the story, she can't do the extrasensory thing, so it just proves it, like beyond a doubt. It is proven she can see them with her eyes. There's really not much more I can add to this one because it's pretty open and shut at this point. Quick editor's note here. I already know that people will still be arguing with all the points that I've just listed above, so I went and found a direct statement from Gege Akutami himself confirming that Toji and Maki can see curses. So we can see here that he's saying, you know, when Maki had her half heavenly restriction, she couldn't see them without glasses because she didn't have literally 0 cursed energy, but Toji, who has 0, developed a resistance to curses, and included in that it says, because his heavenly restriction has strengthened him so much that his eyesight is extremely sharp, he can see curses. It's right there, like Gege Akutami has confirmed it himself. He can see curses. By completely abandoning his cursed energy, Papaguro has become resistant to curses, so seeing them is included within the resistance to them, okay? There we go, definitive proof, bruv. I don't want to see anybody try and argue with the author, bro. No way you take Oda as your canon source type shit, bro. None of that. No, it's done. How dare you misunderstand my manga, bro. Anyway, moving on. I think I'm just going to move on to my next point, which will definitely be even more controversial, to be honest, because it involves Gojo and Sukuna. But first, very importantly, if you can get this video to 2,000 likes, I will be very happy and probably won't go homeless. Okay, thank you, let's go. Okay, this one is definitely going to break some hearts, I'm not gonna lie. There is a very popular line of dialogue that gets said during the Gojo vs Sukuna fight, where one of them says, "This is goodbye. You were born in an era without me and hailed as the strongest, and yet you turned out to be painfully ordinary." That is the TCB translation, sure, but the official translation says pretty much the same thing. Editor, please place them side by side so people in the comments don't get on my ass about it. Thank you. Absolutely everything about this moment points towards Sukuna saying it to Gojo. Like, the speech bubble is blatantly pointing towards Sukuna, but somehow a subgroup of Gojo fans have decided Gojo is the one, you know, on his knees, sweating about to die, somehow finding the willpower to say this to Sukuna. Actually, the main place I see this happening is on TikTok. Yeah, surprise, surprise. I'm very sorry to rain on the Gojo parade, but how in the actual did anybody read this page and conclude that Gojo was saying this to Sukuna. Bro is on his knees, bleeding out his nose after frying his own brain, while Sukuna stands over him with the wheel of Maharaga's adaptation floating above his head, big fat grin on his face, knowing full well he's just won. Like, at this point, they do both genuinely believe Sukuna has won the fight. Look at Gojo's face. Does that look like the face of a man who thinks he's going to win in that moment? The main reason people started believing it was Gojo who said this is because TikTok and such would just go ahead and change the wording to match their agenda. There are lots of people who unironically think the line is, "You live in an era where I wasn't born yet," which, yeah, would only make sense if Gojo said it to Sukuna. But that's not what was said. Not in any actual translation is that what was said. That's just made up wording that was created by, you know, the TikTok Gojo glazers, and now a load of people think Gojo said it to Sukuna when Sukuna is very clearly saying it to Gojo. Anyway, moving on, yet again. Right, so in the last video, I had a section all about how Rika is not Yuta's curse technique or the source of his power. I won't go way into it, because, you know, it's already been covered, but my point was that Rika is a Shikigami created by Yuta's power, and she acts as a storage for Yuta's cursed energy and his copied curse techniques. But unfortunately, in that video, I decided to let Orion edit the first 10 minutes, which means he screwed me over big time by showing an objectively incorrect translation of a John Weary page that says Rika is Yuta's technique. This translation has been confirmed wrong, like, forever. She's not a technique, she's just a storage for his power. I just wanted to clear that up because, yes, I absolutely completely understand why you would doubt what I was saying when the panel on screen said the exact opposite. So, thank you, Orion, you bloody donkey. The point is, that was a mistranslation and Rika is not Yuta's curse technique. Speaking of Yuta though, I also thought I should clear up some misinformation about how his 5-minute timer works in relation to his domain expansion, because the anti-Yuta Twitter clowns have taken to blatantly making stuff up. Yes, in Sendai Colony, Yuta used his domain expansion when he was connected to Rika, but Yuta does not need to be connected to Rika to use his domain. His fight against Sukuna in Shinjuku was proof of that because he used his domain despite not being connected to Rika. The misinfo here is that many people believe Yuta actually fought Sukuna in his 5-minute mode during that Shinjuku fight, but it's actually just normal Yuta with a partially manifested Rika. The proof is that A, you can literally see Rika is only in her partially manifested form, and B, Yuta uses his 5 minutes to swap into Gojo's body after this point, meaning it's literally impossible for him to have used it already. I presented these facts to a relatively infamous JJK Twitter account and was met with this counter. He first said that Yuta could only access his technique when Rika is manifested, so he couldn't have opened a domain without it, which to be fair, is an understandable line of reasoning, at first. But it's pretty easy to debunk because even though he can only access his copied techniques in the 5 minutes, the copy technique itself is still engraved on Yuta's brain and body, not on Rika. Domain expansion is achieved by imbuing a technique into a barrier, which he should in theory be able to do without Rika. You see, Rika only acts as a storage because one brain can't hold that many techniques at once, but as Sukuna showed us when he used domain amplification inside his own domain expansion, domains take on the burden of a curse technique. So Yuta should be able to imbue the technique itself into the barrier without needing Rika to be active as his storage because the domain will do that job. But the much easier argument to make is that Rika is only partially manifested in the domain and therefore we literally see Yuta do it. The guy, this is so ridiculous. The guy then chose to only address the Rika part by claiming that Rika doesn't need to be fully manifested in the 5 minutes and that Yuta can choose whether she is or not. I then asked, you know, why the fuck Yuta would actively nerf himself against the Ryomen Sukuna by not fully manifesting Rika, and his response was simply, I don't know, maybe he just didn't want to. Yeah, bro, the Yuta haters, bro, they just have to make stuff up, they just have to lie. So, yeah, in conclusion, Rika is not Yuta's curse technique, and Yuta can use his domain expansion without being connected to Rika. Okay, binding vows are another one that I addressed in my first misinfo video, but I need to update it because I do need to correct an error I made that the comments kindly pointed out. I said that self-imposed binding vows are nothing more than a simple opportunity cost trade-off system where you have to give up one thing in exchange for another, and that there is no divine intervention or extreme punishment for breaking a vow with yourself. But it turns out this is only half true. To the best of my knowledge, every vow that I did mention in that video works exactly like how I said it does. It is a simple trade-off system, and Kenjaku himself states the worst that can happen is you lose what you gain should you break a self-imposed vow. However, I completely forgot that there is one specific self-imposed binding vow that was made in the series which potentially defies all of this. Miwa's vow to never wield a katana again should she fail to strike down Kenjaku, which obviously she did because she's a bum. That should mean that she's never gonna be able to wield a katana again, and in the final arc, the reason she's not out there trying to box with Sukuna is apparently because she can't wield a katana, which is bullshit, because she's, you know, obviously just a bum. But the point is, why can't she wield the katana? Like, is it only herself stopping her, you know? If it really is only a simple trade-off system, then why can this binding vow even exist? I mean, there is a very strong implication that some higher power is either stopping Miwa from physically holding a katana, or will punish her for doing so. So why is it that this self-imposed binding vow seems so different from the rest, and what would happen if she broke it? Well, to be completely honest, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me, mainly because Gege never actually showed the consequences of breaking a binding vow like that. I stand by my explanation of the vows I talk about in the video, but I did think it was important to correct my mistake and clear up that a simple trade-off system is not actually all there is to it, as proven by Miwa's case. So yeah, in conclusion, how do binding vows work? I don't know. Moving on to something a bit more topical though, cursed energy color. Season 3 of JJK put a lot of headcanons to rest by showing that both Akari and Ryu Ishiguri have blue cursed energy just like the rest of the sorcerers in the verse. Yuta has pink cursed energy because he's blessed and built different, and cursed spirits generally have purple cursed energy, but other than that, JJK sorcerers have blue cursed energy. Now, Restless Gambler got absolutely mega fried on Twitter when Hikari's cursed energy was revealed in the anime, which is kinda hilarious because he didn't even say anything like that crazy. He only said that, you know, a blue versus blue fight for Hikari vs Kashimo isn't as cool as a multicolored clash, which is true. You see, there is a fine line between illiterate headcanon and simply thinking something else would work better. There are people who genuinely believe that Hikari had canonically green cursed energy, and that his hair turns fucking purple in Jackpot, which might very well be the case, or at least the hair thing, but we don't know that. There's nothing in the story at all that actually canonically suggests this. Not at all. There's one volume cover of Hikari, not even necessarily in Jackpot, with purple, you know, hair, either because Gege decided to do a slightly more stylized cover, or just because he's colorblind, I don't know. But yeah, the kind of people who believe this stuff wholeheartedly go around social media telling people they're dumb for not knowing this, which is the illiterate headcanon type of thing I was talking about, you know, they're very loud and wrong. Then there are people who know that cursed energy is canonically blue, but simply think that having a mix of colours would be more interesting, and to be honest, I agree. I know Ninjaristic Ninja makes some goated MMVs, but they aren't canon, so deciding to flame the studio for not fulfilling their headcanon is silly, but wishing for it is fine. Just because something is canon doesn't mean it is objectively the best choice, you know? You can wish for the canon to be different if you think it would work better. I mean, Gojo versus Sukuna might end up being a blue-on-blue conflict for all we know, which I think would be much less cool than a blue-on-red fight. Okay, I am kind of yapping, but my point is that with the exception of Cursed Spirits and Yuta, cursed energy is blue. Yuji's red cursed energy in Season 1 is a result of it being incredibly unstable because it's Yuji's first time ever doing that and his emotions were all out of whack. Also, little fun fact for you guys, but we've never actually seen Sukuna's cursed energy in the anime. We have only seen his silver positive energy, which is what positive energy looks like in general. Hopefully, Mappa will bend the rules and make it red or something, because I really like the idea of a red versus blue Gojo vs Sukuna. Anyway, speaking of the Restless Gambler, I have actually brought him onto the video, as well as some other surprise guests later on, to debunk any JJK misinformation of their choosing. So make sure to go subscribe to their channels, and I'll let Gamblrr take it from here.
Alright, what's up guys, it's Gamblrr here, and I wanted to talk about Gojo getting caught off guard. Now, there's a lot of layers when it comes to this topic, because it all stems from one thing, which we'll get into in a second, but there's multiple reasons why people might talk about this. Funnily enough, everything you can think of for this topic all goes back to Gojo fans coping about his loss to Sukuna. If I were to summarize the conversations about this topic in specific, it would be, it makes no sense that Gojo got caught off guard. And I'm gonna try to explain why he got caught off guard, why it makes sense in the story, and why it was a good writing point. The first thing I have to do is tell you the actual statement from Gege, because this thing gets misconstrued, gets thrown around. People come up with new things in the statement that are never there originally, so I'll read it out right now. The question is, when did Sukuna make the binding vow to cut down Gojo? And the answer was, sometime after Kusakabe said he won. The reason he was cut down was also because he had let his guard down after destroying Mahoraga. By this point, Gojo thought Sukuna no longer had a way to bypass Limitless. Perhaps Gojo under normal circumstances would have been able to sense it and narrowly avoid fatality. So no, there is no statement about Gojo would have won if he dodged, or Gojo would have won if he wasn't caught off guard. That's something someone made up. But if you actually read the statement and go and reread the fight, you would realize that it makes sense. Gojo did not know Sukuna had another way to get through Infinity, and that's what he got caught off guard by. I don't want to ramble on and on because this is Allons-Y's video at the end of the day, so I'll make it as simple as possible. In chapter 235, we see Kusakabe literally telling us that, okay, we have a Gojo who has his reverse curse technique versus a Sukuna who's cooked, has no reverse curse technique, and he cannot do anything to Gojo without domain amplification. Kusakabe saying this is indicative of everyone's thought during the fight. Kusakabe thought that, Gojo thought that, the onlookers thought that, and we thought that. It makes sense because the reason why Sukuna was using Mahoraga was because Mahoraga has the way to get through Infinity outside of domain amplification. So with all of that in mind, Sukuna using something else that Gojo didn't know he had would logically catch him off guard, because it's just not something he would predict. To assume Gojo shouldn't have gotten caught off guard by that is to assume that Gojo is like all-knowing or something like that. This might also be the case of people misunderstanding what it means to let your guard down in this context. Gojo didn't just stop fighting Sukuna. That's not what's said. What's said is that he didn't think Sukuna had anything else to get through Infinity. I'll give you guys a good example. Gojo and Sukuna had their second domain clash, and in it, Gojo and Sukuna started boxing, and then Sukuna started slapping up Gojo, and he was like, what? How is that even possible? Oh crap, he can use domain amplification inside of his domain. This is literally an example of Gojo being caught off guard by something he thought just wasn't possible. And this isn't even a Gojo-centric thing because Yuta gets caught off guard by the exact same thing as well. It's consistent. Gojo doesn't know everything in the verse, so why would he know that Sukuna can use domain amplification inside of his domain, or that Sukuna has world cutting slash? The final thing I want to mention is how consistent it is that Gojo keeps getting taken down because he gets caught off guard by things. Now, it's not as simple as Gojo getting caught off guard in the same way 3 times, because that's not what happens. Funnily enough, Gojo getting caught off guard by Toji is in the exact opposite way that he got caught off guard by Sukuna. Gojo already acknowledged that Inverted Spear of Heaven is probably going to get through his Infinity, so he said, I'm not going to let you get near me. The Sukuna version of that is him not knowing Inverted Spear of Heaven is even in his arsenal, and then he just suddenly uses it. However, it is still the case that Gojo got caught off guard 3 times, and all 3 times, he did get taken down. As the Gojo fans like to say, he's too strong to lose, but too human to win. Unless we're talking about Sukuna, of course. But yeah, let me give Allons-Y back his video. On to the next brain rot from JJK fans.
Now, before I let clown number 1 and clown number 2 say their piece, there are a couple more important things I want to clear up, specifically about Modulo Yuji's Black Flash. In my original video, I had a section explaining that Yuji Itadori cannot land a Black Flash 100% of the time, even if he wants to. I also explained that sorcerers can try and land a Black Flash and succeed, meaning that Black Flash can technically be done at will by anybody. They just can't be done at will consistently, and that's something Nanami himself confirms. Literally 2 weeks after releasing that video though, Yuji Itadori returned in Modulo and appeared to land a Black Flash completely on command. Now obviously, this is nearly 7 decades later, so it doesn't change anything about Shinjuku Yuji being able to do it, or rather, not being able to do it, but this moment definitely makes it seem like he can actually land one whenever he wants to in Modulo. Sure, I personally might think it's boring and that it doesn't really make much sense, but that doesn't change the fact that he very well could have the ability to Black Flash completely on command. By the way, I say it doesn't make sense because cursed energy control is not the only factor to determine a black flash. When I said this before, people got on my ass about how a 70-plus-year-old Yuji would have the cursed energy control necessary to do a black flash whenever he wanted, but that's dumb because cursed energy control isn't the only factor. There are things out of a sorcerer's control that determine black flash. Still though, it does seem like, for whatever reason, he can do it. The only problem here, and you're gonna need to hear me out on this one, is that ultimately it does just come down to interpretation. When I first saw this moment, I thought for sure we would get some kind of follow-up explanation, or even a second black flash to really drive home the point that Yuji could do it whenever he wanted, but it pretty much never came up again. Therefore, there is no hard evidence at all for Yuji being able to do it 100% of the time on command. He might just be so good that he can do it 75 to 80% of the time, for example, which still isn't 100%, consistently doing it at will. However, author intention generally stands above scalar stuff for me, so I'm leaning more towards him just being able to do it whenever he wants, despite me not liking that choice very much. I do think that was probably Gege's intention, and I think it's absolutely valid to say Yuji can now Black Flash whenever he wants to. At the same time though, I also understand if you think his chance is really high, but not 100%. It really is down to interpretation, because there is just no hard evidence at all. He could have just hit one by accident, he could have not intended to hit one at all. There are so many things here. I think author intention does point towards him doing it deliberately, but I don't know. I already know I'm gonna get cooked in the comments for saying that, because for some reason, certain JJK fans can't accept anything less than absolute and complete agreement. It's called a balanced argument, bruv. Chill. But, yeah, realistically, it's open to your interpretation, I guess. I don't think there is a right or wrong here. Anyway, enough yap from me. I think it is about time that I hand things off to Orion and then to Josh.
Wagwan brev, it's me, the guy who Allons stole this video idea from. Yep, I'm the originator, and no one has ever done anything like it before I did. But don't look too deep into that. Anyway, apparently there's people out there who genuinely believe that Takako Uro was the one to die at the hands of Kenjaku in chapter 239, Idiot Survivor. Look, on one hand, I get it. This lady has the black eyes and she kinda... Okay, that's really the only resemblance, I can't lie. Here's why this is wrong. 1, according to this guy, Uro is actually a character from Modulo, dumbass. 2, and more seriously, are we forgetting that Uro lost her arm to Rika during Sendai? The anime also made it very clear that she left that fight one arm down even after the fact. But in the manga itself, during Shinjuku, Yuta literally spams sky manipulation like it's his own innate technique, meaning that her arm couldn't have been healed at any point. Thirdly, we see this unnamed NPC shoot something out of her hair, which isn't exactly an Uro-level technique. And fourthly, I just thought of this, why the fuck would Uro be running away from Kenjaku through the woods instead of just flying the fuck away and disappearing like she did in Sendai? Next, misconception. Tengen's secret. Honestly, I don't think this is much of a misconception and is more the fandom just refusing to read. And if they do read, for some reason they don't want to take the manga explanation at face value. The secret that Kenjaku was talking about is spelled out in chapter 220, Self-Purification, Self-Constraint. Kenjaku is seen trying to negotiate a rule with Kogane. Since Kogane won't accept rules that interfere with the longevity of the game, it declines, and that's when Kenjaku reveals what Tengen was hiding. All of the calling game barriers are built using Tengen's pure barriers as a base. These pure barriers raise the precision of Tengen's cursed spirit suppression and assist people like Ijichi with making their own veils. Had Tengen destroyed these barriers, Kenjaku's plan would have failed entirely. By betting on the gang succeeding, Tengen viewed that as a better alternative to setting the world back 1,000 years in their fight against cursed spirits. So yes, Tengen did have a secret, and no, it wasn't a plot hole. Thanks to Allons for having me. He's still a burger though.
Hey guys, Josh here. One of the stupidest misconceptions, but understandable when it comes to JJK. It was a lot more prolific when Season 2 was still releasing, and that is whether or not Todo can boogie woogie without his hands. And when I mean that, I don't necessarily mean in regards to Todo saying his boogie woogie is dead after he loses his hand to Mahito. I mean more so due to this very specific scene that is like anime exclusive, like a lot of the Mahito, Yuji, Todo stuff. In the scene which kind of causes this confusion, Todo is kind of holding two of Mahito's blade hand things, and despite that fact, he boogie woogies away, whilst both his hands are occupied, so he's clearly not clapped. Obviously, as a meme, people are like, oh, he's clapping his ass cheeks, he's clapping his balls against something, the standard shitposty stuff. That's fine, but that kind of in turn led to a bunch of misinformation and confusion in regards to whether or not Todo can actually boogie woogie without his hands, with obviously the exception of the vibra slap, because, you know, we know that he can boogie woogie, but he had to go through a bunch of extra stuff. He had to have an instrument implanted, you know, so we're just focusing like in Shibuya. This misconception is very intriguing because I'll just to flat out say, no, Todo needs both of his hands to clap. This isn't like a NOT Uro situation where he only needs one hand to pray. No, it's not like that at all. He needs both of his hands to activate boogie woogie. I mean, he said so himself, his boogie woogie is dead with one hand, so how if he had no hands, it would be double dead, okay? Now, the reason that this is so interesting is that the reason why this scene is so visually confusing in regards to, you know, well, how did he teleport if he can't boogie woogie without clapping his hands? We all kind of know that the production of season 2 of JJK, like Shibuya Hidden Inventory, was kind of the pits for Mappa. Like, it was a heinous schedule and they were worked to the bone and it looks phenomenal, but as a result there's a lot of stuff kind of missing, and, you know, the Blu-rays kind of smooth it over a bit, added the scenes that were missing, yet despite, you know, the Blu-rays fixing a lot of things that they couldn't do because of the schedule they were put on for the like initial release of season 2 when it was coming out weekly, this scene was not corrected. This is like the only scene that has like a visual error in it that isn't fixed or acknowledged, which is kind of weird. But just to clarify, right, Todo needs either both his hands to clap or one hand and a vibra slap to activate boogie woogie. He cannot teleport by slapping his ass cheeks together. I don't think that's part of the curse technique. You can tell when you look at the scene initially because like one of Mahito's blades is in the ground. It's clear that there was a shot here of like Todo breaking one of Mahito's swords and clapping, but in the schedule I guess they just didn't have time to finish the shot properly, which is a shame and led to a bit of confusion. Now I will quickly mention one other misconception or just thing that people kind of forget about / fall for, but this is a bit more understandable yet again from the anime and also from Jujutsu no Kaisen, if you remember that. This misconception is that Ijichi is dead. Now there's a couple reasons for this. If you're an anime only, you won't really see Ijichi a lot, okay? And that makes sense. The last time you probably saw Ijichi was him being stabbed by Haruta. He is mentioned. It's said that Shoko healed him and stuff, but, you know, Ijichi doesn't die here. We know this for a fact because he shows up in the Culling Games, he shows up to set up the barrier for Gojo. Like, he is alive. But because of how visceral this scene is with Haruta and how very rarely Ijichi is, because he's the most minor of minor characters, a lot of people thought he was dead. Just like the author of the fan-ending manga thing, Jujutsu no Kaisen, who put Ijichi in the airport with like Yuki and Yaga. They just killed Ijichi. It's messed up. But no, Ichiji's not dead. He didn't die. As we see in Modulo, he lives his dream, gets with Shoko by the looks of it, which is, you know, Ichiji's the goat for a reason. But yep, toodles fellas, that's my section. I am the one editing this video, so if I do make this as long as possible, Allons has to pay me more. So yeah, make sure to go in the comments to tell him to pay me more, fellas. Peace.
Again, thank you to Gamblrr, Orion, and Josh in Betweener for helping with this video, and make sure to subscribe to all of their channels. Before I end the video though, there is one more thing I wanted to quickly rant about. You see, the vast majority of the JJK fandom is actually, you know, hella vibes. It's overall a pretty great space if you know the right people. It's a very creative space as well. That's something I really like about it. And forgetting details from the manga, falling for misconceptions, or getting stuff wrong is completely fine. Like, the fandom has a way of acting as if it's a crime. Sure, I know it's a funny joke, you know, you say the JJK fans can't read, it is just a bit, you know, it's funny. You're gonna have to take that joke, it is what it is. But there is this kind of a little bit more niche and strange expectation for people to have remembered literally every word ever said in this entire 271 chapter series, and if you don't, then there will be lots of people in your replies calling you slurs and saying you can't read the manga, which obviously goes beyond a joke. That's just you being a dickhead because someone hasn't memorized 56 billion words. Making innocent mistakes is fine. After all, that's, you know, why I make these videos, and I still get shit wrong all the time. It's the hostile ones that turn everything toxic. You know, the ones who get stuff blatantly wrong in the most obnoxiously demeaning way. It's easy to spot those people because they tend to start things off by just firing slurs from the get-go. Listen bruv, if you're gonna be a knob, then at least be a knob who's right, you know? The very, very, very loud minority of JJK fans that love to spam JJK fans can't read to any mistake they see at all, while still being blatantly wrong themselves, are ultimately what make this shit seem very toxic to everyone. Basically, stop telling people they can't read until you can read. Unless it's a joke, obviously. Sorry, this really has turned into a personal rant, but whatever, it's my channel, I can say what I want. Anyway, like the video, subscribe to all of the channels. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in a bit.